Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Paro and he says to him, so Hashem, the God of the Jews, said, until when will you refuse to be humbled before me? Here we see obviously that Paro is not just an arrogant person, but Paro is simply refuses to change, even though he sees the wrath of God pouring upon him. Now, as much as we could talk about the different details, what I wanted to discuss is really to look at your own life. Look at the life of other people that are not exactly going well. And if you look close enough, it's usually almost everyone that you know. The only people that typically have fulfilling lives are the ones that are glued to Hashem, glued to His Torah, and are constantly making the Torah a permanent part of their life, where it's not just something they're delving into like womanizers. Like the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin says in the name of Resh Lakish, a person that delves into the Torah occasionally, one day here, one day there. He's like a womanizer. Today he has a date with that one, tomorrow he has a date with that one. He doesn't want to settle down. That's a person that delves into Torah in such a fashion where it's just whenever he has a chance or he has nothing else to do. So you have obviously many people out there among our nation that are in such a status where they're either delving into the Torah occasionally or not at all, and living secular lives, even if they have a kippah bigger than mine. Many of them are living secular lives, and people have the wrong ideology. And when you look closer into their lives, you see how much they're suffering. Not necessarily because the people that learn Torah nonstop don't have suffering. I mean, it's simply a person that sees my hand broken in 2 bones, sees that this is not exactly a pleasing experience. But nonetheless, when a person is cleaving to Hashem, when he's glued to Hashem, the suffering becomes a choice. Yes, this hurts, but to suffer from it is something that is part of your mentality if you don't know why it happened, if you don't know who did it. When you have an answer for everything that happens in your life, when you have a source for all the blessings and what doesn't look like a blessing, you know where the source is, and that source is always your Father in heaven that loves you dearly and only wants the best from you. Even when you break a couple of bones in a strange way, you bless Hashem and thank Him because you know that this too is good for you. And thank you very much for causing me pain nonstop for the last couple of weeks. Why? Because you know it's good for you. Now, a person that's glued to Hashem can easily understand and say, of course, this is what we do all the time. What do you mean? A person that's not glued to Hashem, it says, are you insane? What do you mean? How could you be happy about breaking bones? How could you be happy about how could you be happy about not being, the richest man in the world? How can you not be happy about anything that's missing? And that's the problem. When a person is not glued to Hashem, they simply put themselves in a state of suffering by choice. And that's why when I told you, if you look closely at most people are suffering. How much they're suffering depends on how much they lack belief in Hashem. And generally speaking, when you start seeing people, you see that their degrees of suffering never stays the same. Where it starts one way, there's a broken bone, there's a flat tire, there's a lost job, there's lost money, there's all types of horrors that happen in the world. And you see that little by little, the suffering increases and gets worse and worse and worse. Once in a while it seems like it takes a break, but then it catches up as if the break never existed. And unless the person changes their behavior, that suffering just simply continues to flourish in their life and literally be like a black cloud among their life. Their marriage exists, but only out of convenience. Their parenthood exists only because they already had them. Their job is there, but only because they need to make a living. Whatever they have, it's simply just there. And many times people live such a life where every day is just, an opportunity to consume as much time in order to pass the day and survive it, just to see the same or worse tomorrow. And you see many times the lives of many people are horrible. And actually the Ramchal says that most of a person's life is not going to be the joy and happiness. You're going to have places of joy, the joy of having a child or getting married, benefiting in some way or another, profiting in some way or another. Sure, those things exist. But without Torah, there is simply no happiness. And all of the things that a person gets joy from are generally temporary. Therefore, most of their life is simply suffering. And when a person does not know the source of all good, when a person does not know how to appreciate good, what ends up happening is that they literally live a life of suffering. And they don't really understand why, but they hope for better times that generally never come unless they change themselves. Paro sounds like a lot of people, in a way where Moshe Rabbeinu tells him, how long is it going to be? How long will you refuse to be humbled before God? Meaning that, how long are you going to elect to get more and more suffering? Because the choice is yours. If you humble yourself before God, you make God your priority number one in life, priority above your wife, your husband, your children, your job, your everything. Until then, you're simply going to suffer. Not only because of the different wake-up calls that Hashem sends you, but also because you're not going to know how to be happy. And Paro is given that same sentence. He obviously doesn't wake up. But do you see the same types of things happening in your life, in your friend's life, in your parents' life, your kids' lives, where you see that there are things happening and they're just not changing? They're waiting for the times to change. Like the false ideology of, time heals all wounds. It's not really true. It doesn't heal all wounds. Perhaps it makes you forget. Perhaps becomes a distant memory, but it doesn't necessarily heal. When a person sees that they're losing money, they're losing a zivug, or a marriage, chas v'shalom, or they're losing a different good blessings that they had, this is Hashem speaking to them and telling them, I want you to do TeShuva. But a person is not naturally going to humble themselves and say, no, I lost the job not because of Hashem. I lost the job because I woke up late. I lost the job not because of I'm not religious enough. I lost the job because I didn't call my customers back. The marriage didn't work out not because we weren't close to Hashem and observing Torah. It's not that. It's that the marriage didn't work out because we just were two different people. As if any couple are the same. Every couple is two different people. But you're going to rationalize that your marriage didn't work. Why? Because you're two different people. And the same exact logic, warped logic, is applied to everything. And Moshe Rabbeinu is telling us, stop being like Paro. How long is it going to be before you humble yourself and realize that all of your troubles are coming from a single source? It's coming from Hashem trying to wake you up. And letting you know, I want you to get closer to me. How much closer? Much closer. Much closer. What do I do after I get much closer? Get even closer. And after that, even more and more and more. To the point where you're literally glued to Hashem. That you think about Hashem even when you do business. You think about Hashem even when you're with your kids. You think about Hashem at all times. You're constantly learning His Torah. You're constantly looking for mitzvot. You're constantly looking for opportunities to do things that are connected to Hashem. And if you don't see a connection, you create a connection. Why? Because you can't see anything that doesn't have Hashem in it. Now, Paro did not want to see Hashem. Why? Because to see Hashem means that he has to admit that his whole life was one big falsehood. And this is the same trouble that many people have, whether they're coming from different religions and they realize that their falsianity in Islam and Buddhism and in Reform and all types of other sects and cults, even when they call themselves Judaism, but in reality they're nothing like Judaism, whether it's Messianic or Reform or Conservative or open Orthodoxy, closed Orthodoxy, all this nonsense that people have. Obviously, there's one truth, not multiple truths. And Hashem is constantly giving us signs. I want you to come to the truth. And the biggest difficulty that many people have is humbling themselves to admit, I was wrong. We are meant to be a light unto the nations, not to follow their misguided practices. Remember, every Jew has to remember that he's a Jew and she's a Jew. We don't celebrate non-Jewish holidays, even if they seem harmless. It's a zilzul, disrespect to the Torah, and could lead to Chilul Hashem, desecration of God's name. Stick to our holy Torah and our own holidays. That's the path of a true Jew.